takes over 10 years to design, develop, and actually distribute a new drug. And I think the price of a new drug is still estimated. So the whole development process is still estimated at around $3 billion US. So I'm kind of wondering, to which extent do you, as someone working in the industry, see that the time and costs could be reduced with just AI and computational model? At the end of the day, I mean, we also saw during the pandemic that the vaccine was developed in, I think it was less than a year or something like that.
Yeah. Well, certainly with AI, we're seeing evidence already of the speed with which you can discover targets and discover new molecules, right? So the early stage stuff is moving much faster already. The kind of preclinical validation, the evidence you need to get to an IND, that hasn't changed a ton yet. I belong to an organization called the Alliance for AI in Healthcare, and we do a lot of regulatory thought leadership and data thought leadership. And on the regulatory side, we are writing a framework for digitizing the IND so that more of that would be done with AI as well. But in clinical development, I think AI is having a real impact already, but I don't think it's started to impact the timelines as much as we might hope. And part of the reason why is that, well, the reasons why is that clinical development is slow and cumbersome and expensive for a huge number of reasons. One of them is just recruitment is hard, right? So when you have 10,000 clinical trials running for PD-L1 combinations, how are you going to find enough patients for all those trials, right? It's just hard to recruit, hard to enroll. Access is a huge issue. We know that the gulf in information between big cancer centers and community hospitals and community clinics is huge, right? So access to the latest drugs and latest clinical trials can be slowed down just by access issues. These are all areas where I do think AI will have a difference. A lot of real-world data efforts around trying to match patients to trials, I think, are going to make a difference. Helping even rank clinical trial sites and CROs so that drug companies work with the best companies that are most likely to improve things. Where Genialis is trying to chip away at this is we envision a world in which a lot of clinical trials are designed very specifically around kind of tailored patient populations. So I know there's an economic incentive to have your drug be labeled for everybody, right? Keytruda is a good example of this, where it's gotten very broad labels, although recently even biomarker-driven labels. We still see pretty low efficacy rates. So a more ethical world is one in which drugs have biomarker-defined labels from the outset. Those labels can expand over time. They probably will. But to design the trials and the strategy in the clinic from the beginning to find the patients who are going to benefit most and build very efficient trials around that. I think that will trim a fair bit of the development time down, but it's not going to solve all of the problems.
Mm-hmm. And since you mentioned pricing, I'm got kind of two questions there. So we talked about how difficult it is to recruit patients for clinical trials. At the same time, what we are discussing is precision medicine, and to a very kind of narrow point where basically you're almost designing a drug for a very, very small subset of patients. And so how do you envision the future of precision medicine if you can't really do large-scale studies that would really confirm that this works? Are the criteria in terms of what's required, in terms of the number of patients that need to test the drug, is that going to change?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So for biomarker-driven trials in general, there's no reason why you still can't have a large N number of patients for a lot of these things. But there are statistics that allow you to power your trial with fewer patients, depending on what you're trying to test and prove. And if you have a way of pre-selecting patients, in principle, you can get the number of patients that you need for a properly powered trial down. The personalized medicine movement, where drugs truly are designed for individuals or small cohorts, so certain gene therapies, cellular therapies, even potentially targeted therapies that look at specific protein conformations. Yeah, those are going to be very small trials. I think one potential solution is in the world we call digital twins. So this is not something Genialis does, but it's a branch of AI that I'm super excited about, or an AI application in healthcare, where we use AI to essentially create a digital placebo arm, right? So a control arm based on all the information we have about those patients, so that the patients are actually getting the medicine and their digital avatars is serving as the control. I don't know how soon we'll see that in cancer, but we're already starting to see some progress towards that in certain neurodegenerative diseases and elsewhere. And there's a strong ethical case, I think, to make for the use of digital twins in a lot of disease settings where, patients are sick, and giving them not the most promising thing is not really an option.
How come you don't use digital twins yet? How deeply are you looking into that? There's a lot of companies focused on that too.
Yeah. Well, just because, companies have to focus on something, right? So I like the idea of digital twins, and I think in the long run, this is going to be part of Genialis's toolbox, especially around the